I was in a relationship with a covert narcissist who stole from me and tore my self-esteem apart until a friend helped me get free. I was 24 when we met. Natalie and I were in a class of women training to become care workers for the elderly. For me, even though these jobs didn't pay all that well, it was good work that I looked forward to, and I thought anyone working in care would actually care about people like I did. Actually wanted to look after people who might have been our own grandmas or grandpas. I didn't realize some people just do this job just to make ends meet. I know that makes me naive. Natalie told me about her lonely childhood within days of meeting her. Her golden boy brother, her mother who forgot about her mostly until the chores needed doing. She pulled on my heartstrings, and I found myself wanting to help her, to show her the attention and, eventually, the love she never had. My own childhood had also been lonely. My parents not great to say the least, and I related. She would send me voice notes. Her voice would tremble just enough for me to catch it, and I felt her fragility. "You make me feel seen," she'd say, and I was happy that I was giving this woman that I was falling for some of the happiness I believed she always deserved. The changes were small at first, and I didn't notice them as they quietly accumulated. When I was burnt out from a particularly difficult 12-hour shift and texted her to say I just needed the night to myself, she seemed understanding. But a couple hours later, my phone buzzed. "You're making me feel lonely. It makes me feel like I'm back in that house being ignored all over again." Whenever she made a claim of hurt feelings, I'd fold. I'd text back paragraphs of apologies, assuring her I wasn't pulling away, I was just bone tired. But my exhaustion seemed to feel like an attack to Natalie. And eventually, I didn't really have time alone anymore. She started to say things like, "You're all I have. I don't think I'd survive without you." It sounded like devotion, but in retrospect, it was a trap disguised as need. At a friend's barbecue one afternoon, Natalie told a story. "My mom used to scream at me for eating too slowly," she said, looking sad, contemplative, staring at the food in front of her as we ate. "She'd take my plate away and send me to bed hungry." I sat frozen and stunned. That was my story from my childhood that I had shared with her. I had told her about it one night in the dark, how my mother had done that, how more than once I'd cried alone in my room, my stomach aching. Natalie had helped me then, telling me, "You didn't deserve that." And yet now, she looked straight at me, and it felt like she was daring me to say something, but I didn't. I was too shocked to. Maybe if I had, things would have been different. I often wonder if my silence gave her permission. She convinced me to move in with her just 3 months into our relationship. I knew it was a bit fast, but she was so lonely and needed me. I felt like I had no choice. I didn't want to be unkind. And we had a rare opportunity, a chance to rent a small apartment from a relative of hers at a very modest price. She suggested that since we had this great deal, and since the long shifts of care work could be hard for me, I could quit for a while. Just focus on getting our apartment set up, focus on cooking meals, basically take the domestic side of things. I could find a part-time job later or volunteer with the elderly instead. She presented it as wanting to make my life easier. So I left my job behind, trusting that we would set up the household and live the way she had described. But after I became dependent on her, things started to change more quickly. She would sigh often and loudly. She started to criticize my cooking or complain that a particular shirt she wanted to wear hadn't been cleaned yet in the laundry. She would complain about how hard it was to, quote unquote, manage everything while I just sat around. And then one day, my mother called. Cancer. 6 months later, she was gone. The morning I found out, I was sobbing on the floor when Natalie came home. She looked at me, eyes cold. You've cried for weeks. You knew this was coming. How many more weeks are you going to just cry all day? That hurt me to the core. I sobbed harder in shock. Her words were salt in a huge and very fresh wound. It was the first time it crossed my mind to try to leave her. But by that time, this is 6 months later, I felt all alone in the world, and I had started to feel like I had to prove myself to her, to prove I wasn't worthless or lazy, that I also did work even if mine wasn't paid. A few weeks later, I inherited $25,000 from my mom. It had only just touched my bank when Natalie said we should invest it in us. When I hesitated, she flew into a rage, telling me I didn't trust her and asking, "What's the point in being together if you still don't trust me?" 8 months later, it was all gone. I stopped leaving the apartment unless I was with Natalie. My loneliness and my worsening self-esteem issues had transformed into a kind of agoraphobia. She had begun saying things like, "You'd be nothing without me. You'd be homeless if I kicked you out. No one else could love someone as broken as you." She told our friends I was fragile, struggling with her mental health, and how hard it was to take care of me. They looked at her with sympathy, and they looked at me like a burden, and I believed her too. When I finally found and applied for a part-time job in dementia care, and I got the job, I felt a tiny bit of my passion return. I felt a tiny bit better about myself. And that's where I met Harper. One evening at work, she asked, "You okay?" And I started crying before I could answer. She and her husband Jesse invited me for dinner at their house. I met their 2 boys and spent the evening feeling normal again. Natalie took most of my paychecks for bills, but Harper helped me set up a secret bank account. Every week, I slipped away a little more, $40, then $60, and I packed in secret. I snuck bags out of the apartment and over to Harper's house while Natalie was at work. Harper and her family knew my plan was to escape as quietly and quickly as I could once the time came. And when that day came, with dawn just breaking over the horizon in a faint blush of pink, I left a note on the coffee table reading, "I can't do this anymore," and I carried my last suitcase silently out of the apartment. By the time Natalie woke up, I was long gone. Voicemails started piling up. "You ungrateful bitch, you think you can survive without me? You'll come crawling back, you always do. You have nothing without me." Eventually, I turned off my phone. Harper let me stay in her spare room. I woke up the first morning away feeling terrified. I'd made a huge mistake, but Harper set me straight. I started therapy and I went back to work full-time. In training, we're told to leave everything outside of work outside, so that's what I did. I focused on the residents. It helped me to get out of my head, to avoid either panic or depression. After a month at Harper's, a month where I did everything I could to help with housework, and yet felt guilty and intrusive the whole time, while Harper and her family were always extremely kind, I got my own apartment. Natalie kept texting and calling, but I never replied, even though part of me really wanted to. I stopped wanting to apologize and started wanting to fight back, to confront her, to yell at her, to demand apologies from her instead. But my therapist made it clear People like Natalie can't and won't be accountable for themselves or their behavior. That the ultimate goal is simply to lose all interest in them. I found that hard to accept, and truthfully just hated hearing it. I hated that I had to do all the healing. I had to do all the changing and the growing, while Natalie would do nothing but blame me. It's been about 18 months now since I left Natalie. I haven't started dating again, but I feel more confident now. I won't ignore red flags disguised as needs. I won't suffer to make someone else comfortable. And I won't apologize for existing with autonomy just because of someone's desperate need to close me into a box where I don't belong. When I do start dating again, I will be my whole authentic self. And if that's not okay, then I'll move on. Thanks for joining me for this story. If you enjoyed this reading, please hit like and subscribe so you don't miss future uploads. Leave us a comment and let us know what kind of story you'd like to hear next. This is Tales by Rachel, where we breathe life into every story.